What up, people? It's a beautiful world out there. Let's get up, get out, and get ready to take on the day. Ugh, that guy's a real. See you next time. Rather fittingly, today we're looking at r/am I terribly awful, where we get to judge people across the world from the comfort of our own phones. Isn't technology wonderful? Today, we're going to hear about a groom who kicks his mother out of his wedding. But that's later. For now, let's get on with it, yeah? Nice. This one's from Am I terribly awful for being upset when my daughter said she didn't want a vacation for her graduation? I'm a 48-year-old woman, and my daughter Meg, 17, and I are very different.
Shut up, Meg.
I love to travel and am very extroverted, while Meg, unfortunately, is very introverted and likes to play video games. A month ago, I told her that I want to go to the Bahamas with her when she graduated, and she didn't say no, but recently she told me that she didn't want to go to the Bahamas and would rather go to Universal Studios with her girlfriend. I got upset and asked her why on earth she'd want to go to Universal, which is something we could do whenever we have the money, and not the Bahamas, which was a once-in-a-lifetime experience and something that every teen girl would want to do, and was something that I've always wanted to do. She said, "Because you know I don't like to travel. You don't even want to go celebrate my graduation. You just want to go so you can have a stupid vacation. And even if I did want to travel, you know that I hate hot places." I was hurt because I try so hard to make her happy and thought the Bahamas would be nice since she loves ocean creatures and it's something we'd both like, but apparently not. Am I terribly awful? It's actually a really lovely thing to offer your daughter a holiday as a graduation present. It really is. And I personally would love to go to the Bahamas. Though I have to say, I suspect having the OP alongside would be a painful experience. What's less lovely is saying that it's unfortunate that you and her are different and that she's an introvert. If you want to go on your dream holiday to the Bahamas, go, have at it. But don't pretend it's all about your daughter and get all shirty when she points out it's actually the opposite of what she would see as a good time, and that you, as her mother, should know that. I think Mum gets a rating of about 40% fecal cavern. The thought really is lovely, but that thought is entirely about you. Your daughter's right, it's nothing to do with celebrating her graduation, and completely about you going on your dream holiday. This one's from AmItheA Throwaway Ben. Am I terribly awful for refusing to let my stepbrother and his family live with me? When I have a huge house, he's offering rent, and they have nowhere else safe to go. When I, a 28-year-old woman, was 10, my mother married my stepfather Nick. My mother was a loving and involved parent to Nick's son Ben, now 34, but not for me. There were pictures of my mother, Nick, and Ben all over the house, but none of me. They found any excuse to have family time without me. My mother told me once that it was hard for her to love me and look at me because I looked so much like my father. My father was an alcoholic and a serial cheater. My mother and Nick would constantly make comments about how I was going to turn out as a failure or an embarrassment, just like my father. Ben was extremely cruel to me and my mother, and Nick only responded to his verbal and emotional abuse by telling me to respect Ben. My only familial support was my paternal grandparents. They supported me unconditionally. They helped with my college, and I moved in with them after graduation. My grandparents are now in heaven. I inherited their home and have lived there alone for 3 years now. I've tried many times since graduation to talk to Ben about how his bullying impacted me. Ben takes no accountability for any of his cruelty towards me and only says, "Even if it was that bad, we were just kids." Or, "Why are you still caught up on that? That was ages ago." I hadn't talked to Ben in almost 2 years before he reached out to me through social media. Ben explained that he and his family are being evicted from their previous home. I'm not sure about the reason why, but apparently it's bad enough that practically nowhere is willing to accept Ben and his family as tenants. The only place that's willing to accept him is in an extremely shady area, and he feels it isn't safe for his daughter Adeline. My mother and Nick aren't an option, so we hope that he and his family will be able to stay with me. I admit it's a big house, 3 bedrooms and a large yard and garage. Ben said that Adeline could take one room and he and his wife could live in the other, and he offered me a sizable rent. I told Ben no, and that I don't really feel comfortable living with him again because of what he put me through as a child. Ben made the same arguments about that was in the past, and that we probably wouldn't need to interact with one another because of our differing schedules. I told him no, and that was final. The people that I've explained this situation to are divided. The people supporting my decision says Ben has never treated me like family, and he doesn't get to waltz into my life demanding familial support when he hasn't even apologized for his verbal and emotional abuse. But a lot of people are telling me to think about Adeline, because my decision will have the heaviest impact on her and not on Ben, and I should know more than anyone that no child should be punished for their parents' bad choices. Now I'm conflicted about my decision. Am I terribly awful for refusing to let them move in?
Well, you're absolutely not in the wrong here, are you? Putting my trusty armchair psychologist hat on again. Your stepbrother, and your mum and stepfather for that matter, have been emotionally abusing you for years, since the age of 10. Even now, your self-confidence has been whittled down to a point where you feel less valuable than your brother Ben. He spun you a sob story to try and get you to cave in and let him and his family live in your house. If, and it's a big if, he does have the money to pay you sizable rent, then he has the money to live elsewhere. So the reasons for nobody being willing to rent to him lie in the actions of them as a family. The fact he's not properly disclosed these reasons is a huge red flag. When people feel genuinely hard done by in those situations, you usually can't get them to shut up about the exact reasons why. Yes, he's got a daughter, and yes, she is blameless in all of this. But that alone is not enough for you to put yourself in a situation where you feel uncomfortable in your own home. All of those people who seem to suggest that you owe Ben and his family a place to live could, should they wish it, step into the breach and provide it themselves. I strongly suspect they will be less than willing to do that. In all fairness, it's reasonable for Ben to reach out and ask, even if it has been 2 years. But it's also extremely reasonable for you to refuse. I think my ratings here for Nick and Ben have got to be 70% balloon knot, and we'll stretch that to 85% for your mum, for being all of that, plus a terrible mother to you growing up. Seriously, who tells a child they can't love them because they look like their father?
This one's from Sir Professional 4024. Am I terribly awful for not letting my daughter use her college fund for a wedding or a house? Backstory. I'm a 43-year-old woman and have 4 kids. Elle, who's 22, Katie 17, Cam 15 and Isla 5. I'm also currently pregnant. Me and my husband, who's 50, started adding to college funds every month for each of our kids, pretty much as soon as we found out we were pregnant. I won't say the exact amount, but my husband has an excellent job, so it's more than most. We never told our kids because it just didn't feel necessary. Elle got pregnant when she was 16 and ended up dropping out of school. I was very disappointed, but I understood. However, I was under the impression that she would return later, but she has no plans to. The dad stuck around, and now they have one more kid who's 3 and one on the way. They are engaged, but don't plan to marry until they can afford it. They were doing okay financially for a while, but due to the market right now they've been struggling because Elle can't get a job since she doesn't have a diploma, so we've been loaning them money. Katie is a senior and just got accepted into college. We've been setting everything up, and obviously she knows about the fund now. Katie and Elle were talking, and she was telling Elle about the school, and Elle asked how she was planning to pay for it. Katie responded with, "My college fund." I was in the room while they were talking, and this made me panic. We had just planned on splitting it between the remaining 4 since we knew they were going to college. Elle asked me if they all had one, and I wasn't going to lie, so I said yes. She got really excited and went to call her fiancé and tell him the good news. I was confused and told her she couldn't have the money. She asked why, and I said it's for school. She got upset and left my house. The next day I get a call from Elle. She was crying and begging me to let her have the funds so she could finally afford a down payment and maybe even a wedding. I told her she could have the money if she went back to school, and whatever money was left over she could use for whatever she wanted. She got super mad and started yelling at me and saying that it's her money. I told her that it was my money and those were my conditions, and she hung up. Now we are being harassed by her fiancé's family. They aren't as fortunate as us, calling us buttholes and a lot of other names, saying it's all going to go to waste if she doesn't use it. We're setting her up for failure, etc. Now I'm wondering if I'm terribly awful because my dad said we should give her the money as we had saved it for her after all. So, am I terribly awful? Update. My daughter came over on Thursday and we were able to work things out. We both apologised and had a long discussion. She will be getting her GED and will be going to a trade school in exchange for me giving her whatever money is left over. She hasn't decided which one yet, but it will probably be cosmetology. Her fiancé's family has apologised. We also decided to pay for a small wedding ceremony and reception as a gift.
Okay, so this update effectively preempts everything I was going to say. Quite succinctly, I might add. I find it much harder to believe that things were resolved so cleanly than anything else in that story, if I'm honest. I think this whole thing is an example of the fact that people can get a bit wild where money is at play, particularly those who don't have a lot of it. And I'm glad it's not getting rinsed on a flashy wedding. A house is one thing, but having sweet FA, then getting a supposed windfall, and then deciding to spend it on a wedding is a really bizarre way of looking at the world to me. Though it clearly works for some people. In terms of awfulness, the update kind of makes things moot, but I do think the fiancé and his family have got some ground to make up here. Let's call it 25% ring piece. This one's from AmItheA 27744.
Am I terribly awful for kicking my mother out of my wedding? My late wife passed away 6 years ago. We dated for 4 years and were married for 1 before her passing. My mum loved her as a daughter since I'm her only child, and I guess she never truly recovered. I loved my late wife too, but after meeting and spending time with my current wife, I'm sure she was not the love of my life. My mum has never really liked my relationship with my wife Helena. She thinks I moved on too fast and refuses to believe or admit that my love for my Helena is bigger and truer than the one I had for my late wife. There's a few instances before the actual wedding when I thought my mum crossed the invisible line, but my wife, wanting to be accepted, let it pass and asked me to do nothing. My mum was constantly talking and comparing the wedding with my first one. We married young and couldn't afford lots or big things. With Helena, I'm financially stable and I was capable of having a big, beautiful wedding. She asked many times if I could invite my late wife's parents to my wedding as an act of love and to tell them that I was still there for them, but I refused. I haven't talked to them in years and have no reason for keeping them in my life. She was very adamant, and even Helena said that if I wanted to have them there, then it was okay, but I didn't want to. I felt like my mum had held on to my previous marriage too hard, refusing to let go and inviting me to do the same. As bad as it sounds, I was done. I wanted to be with Helena without the burden of always having my ex-in-laws there, watching the life her daughter and I did not have. During the wedding day, my mum actually showed up with them. I asked what they were doing there, and they, very ashamed, said that my mother had invited them and they thought it was okay. My mum said they're my family and I had a duty towards them. I said they could stay for the reception to avoid comments, but that I hadn't invited them and that I was sorry. I looked to my mum and said,
You're not allowed to stay to anything. Leave. We will talk later. She cried and begged, but I asked her again to leave. In the end, the three of them left together, and my dad, who has been divorced of her for almost 15 years, called me terribly awful.
You know what? I think you're well within your rights here. There's no need to invite your ex-in-laws. I'm very surprised that they wanted to come. Your mother repeatedly pushed for it, but as you tell it, you firmly stood your ground and made your wishes clear. That's all fine. What bothers me is the way you talk about your ex-wife. It seems a bit callous, and honestly, it makes me think you're a bit of a dick. You know, just my opinion, but I'll stand by it. I reckon you're running at about 20% rectal cavity. Your mum is about 35%, and everyone else is at 0.
Okay, peeps, we've reached the end of the video. It's time to sit back, relax, and reflect on what we've just heard. Perhaps you can plan your own dream holiday, only taking your child as an afterthought. Or you can slag off your deceased ex-wife while giving a heartwarming rendition of the anecdote where you kicked your weirdly obsessed mother out of your second wedding. Whatever you want to do, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Perhaps you can giggle to yourself while clicking accept all cookies while searching for cookie recipes online. Click the little bell icon so you can get updates or whatever it does. Share this video with your friends.
And remember, most importantly, take a moment to sit in contemplative communication with the beautiful, remarkable, and batshit crazy girl in your head. See you next time.